Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, and good afternoon and welcome to the Hurlingham Club. We're facing some quite stiff competition from Gusbourne Wines, I think, outside there, but hopefully you've all done the sensible thing, got your glass of wine and have now moved here so you can relax. My name is Cuthbertson. I'm the editor of London Magazine, and the talk today is going to be Hermit or Hermit Crab, to move or not to move. We're going to be discussing downsizing, the great downsizing debate, downsizing, decluttering, decamping, and all the decisions that go with it. I'm delighted to welcome an absolutely wonderful panel here today. Let me introduce you. So first, to my right here, we have Charlie Thomas from Bonhams. Charlie looks after private estates and collections, and he's had a busy week, actually. He's just come from Goodwood, where he was auctioning off dog houses, I believe, for charity. Lots of Chinese antiques as well. But he's also looked after some fascinating private collections and house sales, including Sir Michael Caine's and the Earl of Sutherland. And he will be taking questions at the end of the talk as well if you want to find out more. But we'll be asking him a few questions in the course of the day. Next on the panel, Jane Slade. Jane is the editor of Retiremove, which is the first website for independent retirement homes. And she's a journalist of many years. I've known her from my days on the Sunday Telegraph. She is actively writing and has written recently for the Times Bricks and Mortar. You'll have seen an article from her only last Friday about luxury retirement living with cocktails and royal households staff to wait on you. And I'm delighted to welcome Jane here today. And then finally on the panel, we have Nick Sanderson. Nick is the CEO of Audley Villages, has many years of experience in retirement housing. He's also the chair of ARCO, which is the Association of Retirement Community Operators, and again knows this subject inside and out. So I'm delighted to welcome today's panel. Give them a round of applause, please. So I'd like to kick off proceedings. I'm going to talk to Nick actually first about when is the right time to move, and is there a right time to move?
Good morning, everybody. It's the right question, and it's usually the wrong answer actually is given, which is people leave it far too late. In fact, somebody just said to me over in our stand over in the corner, I'll probably move out of my existing house at a point where I can't manage anything anymore. Well, that unfortunately tends to be when actually you've lost the real benefits of moving into age-appropriate housing at an earlier stage. And I understand exactly why that comment is made, which is it's fearful. People are frightened about engaging in any conversation around sort of grouped retirement living, because the perception is that could only be some institutional model of a care home or other. But I think what we'll talk about a lot today is it's not, and you'll see walking around here today, not just us, but our competitors, it's not actually, it's as much about lifestyle as it is about looking after your future needs. So the simple answer, Anne, is normally it's left far too late. And the comment I hear more from all our villages around the country when I meet our owners is, I wish I'd done this many years ago. Yes.
And Jane, what do you think about this? Is there a right time, or in your experience with many, many retirement homes, do they say that people often come too late, or are they starting to come earlier, in fact, now?
Well, I think the issue is that we're all living much longer, and we're all living fit, healthy lives. Yeah. So the average age of moving into a dedicated retirement property is probably in the mid-70s, although they're advertised for after 55 and after 60. And those of us who are around that age think we're all far too young. I mean, the last thing, I'm thinking about is moving into a retirement community. But also, as Nick says, there's so much misunderstanding about what a retirement property is and what a retirement development is. So many people still think it's a care home or a nursing home. So we have this issue about language and how we describe, what are now integrated retirement communities, which in my view is a bit of a clunky term. But there are some really stunning options available now. And I think, and I've probably been to more, maybe even the Nick, I don't know. I've visited so many. And the people who live there, I mean, they really just are living a new lease of life. It's just phenomenal to see. It's a real rejuvenation pool, I would say, of people who are discovering they have these wonderful facilities, they have time to pursue all the things they love. They're not hampered by worrying about the roof and the garden and all the things that we're all probably all worrying about here and thinking, oh, I've got to get back because the cleaner's coming, or oh, I've got to find someone to look after the dog. They really are fantastic places. And obviously the best ones are quite expensive, just like any traditional apartment or home is anyway. But you do find a wide range of people. I think if you're moving to downsize and you want a good life, you really should do it sooner rather than later, just as Nick says. And certainly people who are living in large homes, like many of us may be, children have gone. Really, your home is only occupied at Christmas when the kids come back, and we all feel guilty that. And the children can make us feel guilty too. Oh, you're not moving, Mum. Oh my God, my bedroom. And what about Christmas? What about Christmas? And you think, well, one day a year, guys, come on. And the best thing is that with a lot of these retirement communities, they have guest suites, which I think is just the most wonderful thing. Yeah. So you can have friends, family to stay. You don't have to make the bed. You don't have to clear the bathroom. You don't have to do anything because they can stay in the guest suite. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I know I have a business that is promoting this type of living, but I am so sold that it is just fantastic and really the best choice, I think, for anybody who... Otherwise, you end up probably making 3 moves in your life because you downsize from the big house to a smaller house, and then you might think, oh, I've got to, maybe again, because my partner is not so well, maybe they need a little more support. We've got to think of something else. Do we want care in the home? And the other big thing, I think, is when you are older, the upheaval of moving. I mean, come on, everybody. Moving at any age is just always pretty bad. It's not great. None of us like doing it. But if you're in your 80s and you've suddenly got to get rid of a lifetime of clutter, and, the home and the emotional, not least physical struggle of having to get your head around this idea. And then, of course, the children have already moved to Singapore and America anyway, so they're not around to help because they're all just, oh, well, Mummy, I'm just so busy being a high-flying executive. So I think probably... you have to factor in a lot of considerations to decide when the best time is.
Absolutely. And, you talked about all the incredible upheaval. And a lot of that upheaval, Charlie, involves actually selling the family house, which is a very emotional experience for people with a lifetime of memories and a lifetime of clutter. Now, this is your area. What have you observed about the letting go of the family house?
Well, I mean, it is tough. It is, we see it all the time. We go into houses when people, come to that decision and, they want to downsize. The first thing they want to do is they want a valuation. They want to know what everything's worth. And in some cases, things are not worth what people might thought they're worth, especially when it comes to large bits of furniture made in the 18th and 19th century. Some things might have gone rocketed up in value, Chinese, for example, and, maybe modern British art that was bought in the 70s. But it's a very, very tough, it's a tough call. And, when any auction house goes in, to their initial valuation, they should always do it with sensitivity, knowing that these things, it's not just about value, it's about the sentimentality. And, I know that, when my grandparents died, they said to me, whatever you do, never sell this. And I was like, God. And then when you're told that, it puts a huge sort of, and so I will, I've never, my wife hates it. It's a carved oak table and it's worth nothing, absolutely nothing. It's a children's bedroom, but there is that sentimental attachment. But the valuation, that's the first stage, and then working out what things are worth, and then going from there. But no, it's an extraordinary journey, and it should always be treated with real sort of care.
But you also said to me when we were chatting earlier that, in fact, giving people, being able to sell things and obviously releasing the money that involves, it can give people a sense of control. Downsizing it should be a positive experience and something that people can get control of, rather than feeling like they have to move at the last minute, in a rush, panic sell everything,
Absolutely, and what we normally find is a very enjoyable process. You're learning about these things that maybe you didn't know about, and you do have complete control. You have control about where it's sold, when it's sold, and if you don't like the estimate the auction house gives you, you don't have to sell it. You do have complete control over it. And it is, it's an enjoyable experience. The whole process of auctions, I think, is huge fun, and it is, that part of a journey is great, and I know that many clients that have been for it, they start off, it's a real, the dread, the idea of the auctioneer coming and picking over everything and giving it a value, but actually at the end, it's a really thoroughly enjoyable experience, and everyone learns.
Now, we do all want to know about Sir Michael Caine's house sale, because it's in the public domain. You can tell us a little bit about it. Then, what did you have your eye on when you went through Sir Michael Caine's possessions?
Once I got over the initial starstruck idea that I was actually dealing with Michael Caine, I think just for me, there's two of my favourite films of all time, Zulu and The Italian Job. He was in them, and so anything to do with their posters, I was desperate for a Zulu poster.
How much did that go for in the end, though?
We had several, and they were all valued at quite a modest amount, and all went for many multiple times. I think 11,000 for one, and but he was downsizing. He was moving from a large house in Surrey to a smaller house to be closer to his grandchildren, which I guess is that's a very, very common theme, and that was a brilliant process. And of course, he was there to talk about the stories behind each object. So you had this amazing provenance that it was owned by Michael Caine, but also he could then elaborate on the stories, and which just brings these things to life. Objects are all about, for me, it's a story they tell. And whether it's the contents of Dunrobin Castle that have been in the family for 600 years and many generations, or Michael Caine's collection, which or Nicky Haslam's collection, yes, which was collected over one lifetime. Each object tells a story, which is fascinating.
You mentioned that Sir Michael Caine has moved to be near his grandchildren, and that's obviously a very big theme, being close to your grandchildren, being close to your children, but not too close. Is that right, Jane? Because you and I talked about this. How close is too close?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because, I think within an hour, because so that it's just sort of far enough, but the children can go home, and you're not, you don't feel you have to be on homework duty every Friday with the kids, the grandchildren, and there is this, I think, discreet distancing that is very important. But actually, on a serious note, I think to leave your friends and to leave an area which you've known and loved, to go and move hundreds of miles away or even a long way away to be near your children, I think really you need to think hard about that, because within 5 years or less, your children could have moved again, and you've left your friends for what? And also there is that sort of sense of really expecting the children to come and visit you the whole time, and they're busy. They're not always going to. But however, on the positive side, if you move somewhere beautiful, dare I say it, like one of Nick's lovely developments, then the children or your grandchildren will want to visit you. So, which is a positive thing as well at the same time, especially if it's got a nice pool and a cinema and a library and a restaurant that sells pizza and burgers. I mean, oh my God, you're right. But I think there is this question of the overnight that can be a little bit of a challenge. And also, you're going to be so busy when you live there and you move there. that when your daughter or your granddaughter phone up and say, can we come and see you? Well, I'm sorry, but, I'm afraid month of June, I'm just not available. And, I'm on holiday. We're in Barbados. And, of course, we've got our new bridge friends. And every Thursday we're doing this, that, and the other. So I think you are really looking forward to a completely different way of life where, in fact, it's the reverse. The children are going to have to fit in with you. And that's an education maybe that you need to have with your children to say that I'm not just going to be available. I'm not going to be an on-hand babysitter. So we have to watch it. But just for a moment, listening to you, Charlie, about the auctioneering was so funny because we had to clear out my parents' house. And you were talking about the wonderful provenance of Michael Caine's things. Well, we had a reverse situation. I'd always grown up thinking that the lovely dining table we'd had was Jacobean. And, we're looking back into these wonderful days of this sort of thing. And then this beautiful picture was an original Joseph Cooper or something. Well, when the equivalent of the auctioneer came round and said, no, that's just a tap bit of old Victorian oak, it's certainly not. It was really upsetting, all these stories that my parents had sort of inveigled on all these possessions ended up, no, that's a print. It's just an old print. It wasn't even an authentic picture. So I think people do need to be prepared for a big shock when they realise that all this sort of wonderful stuff that you hope will raise money and be a legacy is sort of really not as it.
Well, you were saying, Charlie, as well that antiques are there to be recycled. That they've been bought and sold for generations, haven't they? And maybe people can decide to keep certain things that have sentimental value, but in fact, it's very often it's better for them to go back out and to people that really want them. Is that not right?
I mean, I feel slightly guilty agreeing with you because, of course, well, I would. I'm an auctioneer. I'm desperate for you to sell everything. Sell it now. Absolutely. I mean, I think it says, antiques. They've been around for hundreds of years. They're constantly recycled. It's a purest form of sustainability. Dining tables especially. I mean, sideboards. When people downsize, it tends to be the dining room that goes, and the eating kitchen is a popular form of, especially in London. So people don't have sideboards and dumbwaiters and dining tables and sets of 16 dining chairs anymore. They can, that market has taken a bit of a hit because there aren't many people living those lifestyles anymore. And of course, the really good stuff is still selling very, very well. But the more the Victorian Jacobean revival, that is a tough market, and it might be 120 years old, but it might be £40. That's a horrible conversation to have, when you are valuing someone's dining table. Well, how can this? It's 120 years. How can it be worth so little? But on the flip side, the Chinese pot is probably now worth £4 million. So there's swings and roundabouts for these things. But I mean, I think knowing that your things are going to new homes and they're going to be loved and enjoyed and used, and of course, then again, the cycle continues.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And Nick, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of places that people might want to move to. Now, what's important is that you're going to a better house. You're going to a house that's more convenient for you. You don't want to feel that downsizing means downgrading in any way. You want to be upscaling, as it were, and having somewhere that's the right size, that's convenient, that's practical, all of these things, so that you don't have to make compromises. That's what the homes that you are involved with are all about. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it is, and that's so true. It's downsizing is a terrible term anyway. The Americans call it right sizing. Sizing to suit your needs when you do it, but downsizing and everything about it appears to be a backward step. I'm going back. I mean, let's be honest, as a country, we're more defined by the houses we live in than most countries. Americans get it completely. They just think, well, why? And they look at us and think, why would two of you stay in a house with 5 bedrooms? Why would you do that? So I'm going to Florida and I'm going to buy an apartment on a lake with a golf course. We don't do that, and that's part of our social background as much as anything else. But it does mean we have to work really hard to make what we do aspirational. So you've got to make it somewhere where people are proud to live, proud to show their friends. I hate to say this, but I call it the golf club test, which is the moment when someone in a local... So if we go and open in Leamington Spa, and the social group to who we will tend to be selling are very much within a group, within the community. They've been local lawyers together, accountants, they're in the Rotary Club together, they are a group. So if you're going to break into that group, you've got to give them a message that they're prepared to tell their friends in the golf club that they're moving into a retirement village. Because most of them will go into the golf club and be very concerned that their friends will think, why? What's wrong with you? What's happened? Have you lost all your money? Are you ill? Has something gone wrong? And I remember having a conversation with actually one of our owners in Leamington Spa, and she's in her late 50s, married someone a bit older. And I said to her, how on earth did you convince your friends that you'd made the right choice? She said, oh, it's easy. I just invite them for lunch in the restaurant, or come for a swim, or join the club, because we have external members of the club. And as soon as they come through the door, it's fine. They get it. It's all done. And that's our problem, actually, and generally as a business. In this country, we have so little of what we do. There's so little knowledge that you have to, every time we go and open in, as we just have in Cobham, we've got to educate the people of Cobham as to what it is we do from scratch, because people's perception is that it'll be it's a care home. So we have to work really hard, and we do it by, I hope Jane would agree, I hope she would, that we do it by very high quality interior design, great facilities, wonderful spas, very good food in the restaurant, accessibility to the community, really important. So we have external club members, probably 200 members per village, so there's always other people coming in and out. And families are very welcome to come in. It's not a gated, locked up community where people feel they've sort of been marginalised. If you don't do that, people will be very fearful. Going to the point, actually, I must just pick up on Charlie's point, 'cause it's really valid. The other problem with people thinking about downsizing is not only how it will be perceived, but also the emotional attachment they think they have to all of their personal assets. And again, part of that is a protection. Part of that is saying, I can't possibly move because the grandchildren will come at Christmas and they love that piece of furniture. But a lot of that is a defensive thing about not wanting to engage with the idea that they should move. So a conversation about downsizing, we did. I couldn't speak openly to our customers unless I'd done it myself. So my wife and I moved, 14, 15 years ago, back up to London. So from a stupidly big house in the country with far too many bedrooms and everything to a 3-bedroom flat on the river. And we had all of these issues to deal with. So vast amounts of furniture bought at auction, inherited from our families, all of that. And I promise all of you, we put most of it into containers because we thought we'll try London. If we don't like it, we'll come back to another stupidly big house. And we put it into containers, went into storage in a warehouse in Horsham, I think it was. And we went back 3 times to 6 containers, and every time we opened them and thought, what on earth did we keep that for? That old linen press that we bought in auction somewhere years ago.
Is there a faux Jacobean table in there as well?
And worse still, it's standing in an open courtyard on a sunny day, and you look at it and it's worm-ridden and horrible. Yeah. And every time we went back, we just emptied and sent them to a local auction and got rid of them. And most of the stuff that we would have said we were emotionally attached to, we've never thought of again.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You're kind of letting go. It's could be quite a liberating experience in many ways. But just you talking about moving back to London, and there is definitely, this festival is called Life's Fine Time. Now, Jane, you've mentioned that actually in London, so much going on at the moment is at lunchtime, and it's aimed at the older market, whether it's lunchtime concerts, but there's so much going on, and actually leaving the big house, leaving the country, coming back into cities, that's a wonderful thing to be doing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it is incredible to think that, was it just 12 years ago, you'll know, Nick, London didn't have a retirement community. There wasn't one in London, and the first one was Battersea Place, that was built in Battersea, the first retirement community there. Now there are lots, plentiful, including Audley's opened one, Riverstone, who's here exhibiting today, and it's suddenly become, people realise, of course, why not? It's the most fantastic city. And I personally, I love going up to town for concerts, and the Wigmore Hall at lunchtime on a Sunday is wonderful. You can, for an hour, for £20, you can go and hear the best music ever. It's all so accessible, and the idea for me to leave this wonderful city and have to retire to the country or the coast is unthinkable. So the more options there are for me, then it's a haven. But also another really, really important point, I think, is when you buy a home that may be 2 bedrooms or less, your home in a retirement community, your home extends beyond your front door. So your home is also the lounge, the restaurant, the wonderful communal facilities, the gardens. It's not just the area where you sleep or watch television or have, and that I think is a psychological leap that people have to make and think about. That actually it's huge. It's incredible. All the bar, it's all yours. It's all part of your home, and where you can entertain and where you choose to read or go for a walk or a picnic. So, and having that in London, which you do as well, and that you're for some, I think it's actually you're increasing the size, if you like, in a way, of your living space or your home, but it's just different ways of using it, different and conveniences. And now with more in other cities as well, talk about London, but more developers are now, Audley again, Leamington Spa and Tunbridge Wells, developing in vibrant towns and cities with good access and transport links to London and other cities, of course, and also it's a way of rejuvenating those cities that have been abandoned by young people who are working from home or moved out to the country, and shops, and it's a way of just keeping high streets going.
Boosting the economy.
Who's going to, using the shops, bring in older people who prefer to shop locally, and also there's a whole volunteering workforce, which a lot of retired people are as well, to maintain whether it's flowers in the church, help with the local school, local charitable organisations. It is huge, and I think that it is our generation that is going to fuel a resurgence of a boom in the economy and property of living, to move into the areas which a lot of youngsters don't want to live in anymore, and creating our own way, our own enclave, with the kind of shops we want, with the activities we want, and the vibrant sort of cultural activities which I think we want as well, which perhaps are sadly lacking in some towns.
Exactly.
Well,
Nick, in fact, you work on a government task force, is that right? And they are looking at retirement property, because we're light years behind other countries, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And actually the task force is specifically to find ways of creating more of what we do, but it's for 2 reasons actually, and it's promoted by 2 government departments, DLUC, very fact called, and the Department of Health and Social Care. And it's because part of the issue around this is because a generation of older people tend to stay put in their homes in this country, it's a real brake on housing liquidity. So when we talk about a housing crisis and not enough young people's housing, it's partly because at the top of the chain people stay put. And there's, every night when you go to bed, there's 3 million empty bedrooms in the country. And a lot of people who can't afford to buy their first house. So the government would like to encourage more of what we do. But the other end is because people leave it too late, they leave themselves at risk in their existing homes, have a crisis, end up in a hospital bed, which fuels the 7 million waiting list.
Yes.
And then means they can't go home, so they end up in residential care, which is everything they didn't want. Which is another reason for doing it sooner rather than later.
Yes.
So, yes, there is. As a government, are very keen on supporting more of what we do. But you're right. New Zealand as an example. New Zealand, in Christchurch, population 350,000, has 60 retirement communities with about 8,000-9,000 properties, and has 16 being built. We don't have that in the whole country at the moment. No. So we are way. I mean, the fourth largest listed business in New Zealand just builds retirement communities. So we are a long way behind. Yeah. And of course, America. I mean, arguably, Florida is a retirement village.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. We've got some catching up to do. But you talked about people being in, I suppose, inappropriate housing, stairs, accidents happening in the home. A lot of purpose-built retirement housing has services on hand, concierge services. Arguably, people can live there healthier for longer because they're better looked after. They're less likely to hurt themselves or be unwell.
Our whole mantra as an organisation is to help people live better for longer. Because it's not just about living, we're all living longer, as Jane said earlier. Life expectancy creeps up. In fact, it's flattening at the moment because we're all living fitter and active lives. And of course, we're part of it, because if people come to us and spend 3 mornings in the gym and swimming, then they will live a better, longer life. And that's our job. So what it's trying to do is condense the period at the end of your life where you need some sort of extra care to as short a period as possible. So what we're trying to build is housing which is not just great to live in when you're fit and active, but as your needs change as you get older, we can increase the amount of support we give you, because we have teams on site who are there 24 hours a day and can then help you as your needs change, hopefully keeping you living a better quality of life and avoiding everything most people are frightened of, which is being institutionalized at the end of their lives in a care home.
Yes, I think that the retirement housing needs a bit of rebranding in many ways, doesn't it? Because
everybody hates the term retirement. I hate it.
It's terrible.
We've had so many surveys and people say, please don't call it retirement housing, just call it housing.
Just call it housing. Or instead of retirement villages, just call it villages, exactly. Something like that. Yeah.
And we do try, but then everyone says, well, what is it?
Yes.
We say, well, it's housing for older people. And they go, oh, you mean a retirement village?
Oh, yeah.
Or worse, a care home.
I can jump in. I think I'm okay. I think COVID really shone a torch on a lot of issues about older people being on their own in big houses, and the concept of loneliness and mental health and these terms which we bandy about, but they were really true experiences for a lot of older people, and really did make people think about, and they're worrying, and their families worried about them being on their own, the loneliness and solitary attitude, and it really did sort of make a lot of, and you saw it in the market, a lot more interest was created about, God forbid, what's going to happen if this happens again? What are we going to do? And what did happen in these retirement communities was the most fantastic services were created. Food was delivered, shopping was done by the staff, would look in, call in, the contact was always there was communication. So they were not as lonely and isolated at all. It just was a saving space for a lot of people, and I think that in this day and age it's something that we all need to think about. And also, if we're all at the moment very happily married to our healthy spouses, one of us is going to die before the other, and we need to think coldly and harshly at, when that happens, am I prepared to live on my own in the big drafty house? Is that fine? Or should we both move and then become part of a community, so if one of us dies or leaves before the other, we can at least feel cocooned and safe, and maybe a little bit sort of sheltered from that terrible sense of loss and grief and shock which is coming upon. So it's all about looking ahead and thinking sensibly about issues and not putting them aside, and one should think about, we need to consult these things, and especially if one partner isn't as well as the other, thinking ahead 5-10 years, what's that going to look like? And then in a lot of communities like Audley and Riverstone, there is care as well. So if you have to go into hospital because you've broken your hip, you can come back home again because you can be looked after in your home, rather than, oh my God, you're going to have to go to a care home. You can't come home, and all these awful decisions that have to be made very suddenly. So there's some very practical and realistic things to think about. But also, back to my original point, your home is part of the whole place, and that's what's so wonderful. And I know, having been around and talked to a lot of people who live there, it's just a revelation, even to them. They didn't quite realise that, gosh, I can just come down and use the pool and the spa. It's living in a club or a hotel that I have a right to use when I want.
Yes, so Jane, you've been around to some of the finest villages in the country. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about some of the glorious extras that you can get?
I'll be careful what I say, Nick.
Yeah.
Because you're going to give me a big discount, aren't I, when I move into one of Audley's? Oh, dear. Well, I mean, I think one always has one's own personal things you like. And I mentioned earlier, I do love my music and I love going to concerts. So if there's a grand piano in a nice big hall, I'm thinking major tick. Love the idea about recitals and being taken away and having lovely entertainment. Good food and the food, my goodness me, I mean, we're talking Michelin star. And as I wrote in one of my pieces on Friday, I mean, the standard of star, the credentials a lot of the chefs have, they've all worked in Michelin star restaurants and hotels. I mean, it's impeccable. And lovely gardens. And if you have a pet, it's a haven, because all pets are welcome. Well, I say all, there may be a few. Your pet crocodile may not be so happy. But the parrot, no, there was one actually who did have a parrot. But lovely dog walking trails and all that sort of thing as well. And the spa, well, what's not to love about a decent hairdresser and lovely beauty treatments for men as well as women. Don't want to be sexist here, guys, sorry.
It's also concierge services, aren't there, as well? So if you want to have a dinner party, somebody can deliver it to you and you can host a dinner party in your own property.
But even better, a lot of the dining rooms will have their own private room as well. So you don't have to get anything in your home. You can have your cutlery. Wonderful, your 80th birthday party will be in a private dining room. So but we're talking top end here. I mean, let's be realistic. We're talking top end. And there are so many different models of all different budgets and sizes. And for a lot of people, it's another thing you do need to think about. Am I really going to use the pool and the spa and the restaurant? Because there are charges for living there, monthly charges, which can be quite high. And it's fine if you're actually going to be using and enjoying all the facilities. But if you're not, then it's worth thinking about, well, maybe I need a simpler model, something that's... And also, again, if you're very old, if you're 90, I would always argue, buying a home at 90, think about rental options. And there are places where you can rent. So there is a lot of choice coming into this market, luxurious, less luxurious, and on all different locations and things. But no, I think it's a no-brainer, personally. But.
Lovely. We've got about 5 minutes or so left, and I don't know if any of the other panels did that, but I would like to offer questions. Yes, we have a question. Someone's going to bring a microphone for you, actually. That might help. Thank you. I should have given you warning about the questions, but I just saw the time, so I thought we'd crack on. This lady here, yes, there's the microphone. Just there.
Hello, thank you very much. The question I'd like to ask you is a very basic one. When one shuffles off this mortal coil and one has this beautiful property that one has enjoyed, what value does it have on the market for my children and grandchildren? Does it depreciate, appreciate? Are there strings attached? Does it affect their inheritance?
You're talking about the retirement property. I think that's a question for you, Nick.
I have to say there are various different models, but the standard of our membership, the ARCO membership, is that you purchase your property on a long leasehold basis, typically. Jane's right, there's an increasing number you can rent as an alternative. But if you purchase on a long lease, it'll typically be 125, 250-year lease, just like an apartment here, for any other privately sold apartment. And that lease, the balance of that lease is available for your inheritors to sell on in the market at the prevailing market price. Typically, I have to say, the models that we're involved in, which have these full services and meet these needs, do track house price inflation. So across we had a piece of research done 2 years ago which said that across those that provide the full range of services, including everything we've discussed, prices should track house price inflation. So if you bought a flat over there and you bought it for 500,000 and the local market price was 600,000, in 5-10 years' time, you would expect to sell it at that price. There are fees attached to living there, as Jane said. Certainly from our model I can speak to, it's partly paid on a monthly basis and partly deferred until you leave, which allows you to keep the monthly charges down. So you put some of it on as a deferred fee when you leave, and that is paid out of the proceeds. So that when the sale comes, you would pay a portion of it back to us for the services you've enjoyed while you've been there, including all of the maintenance, everything around the property. So,
does that answer your question?
I've been switched off.
Oh no, you've switched on again. This gentleman here.
It's purely an addendum. Basically, what you're saying is that your properties are such. Is there any research on the actual business model overall that shows not just your properties, but that these properties do maintain their value, not depreciate, especially given that it's a communal style of living, and you are really out of the frame in terms of dictating what you might want to expect to get for what you've invested? That's all.
Yes, there is some research. I refer you not to ours, but the industry body called ARCO. If you go to the ARCO website, Jones Lang did a piece of research 2 years ago, which showed how it performed against house price inflation. So, sorry.
How did it perform?
Yeah, in line with house price, actually slightly better than house price inflation.
But once again, sorry. Oh.
Yes, my kid's sister started as a typist at Savills and was then put on the main board, and in her final thing ended up as chairman of Berkeley Homes, called Victoria Mitchell. I'm a retired prep school headmaster, so I know nothing about property. She did advise us about downsizing, and it's a very cathartic process, downsizing, because you just get rid of stuff that you think, oh, I'll keep that because I've got the room to keep it. So I thoroughly recommend going through, which I wouldn't have done because I don't have a clue about anything financial like my sister does, the cathartic process of downsizing and moving to London. Thoroughly recommended. A lot of our country friends now have keys for our house in Fulham because they need to do all the things that we've been talking about in Fulham. But I thoroughly recommend downsizing.
Actually, moving into London, but not just for Jane's point of staying where you live in London, but we're seeing it more and more, people choosing to move, well, I did, but choosing to move back into London because of everything you get and everything you're surrounded by. Some people will choose that. There's a very good George Clooney film, if you remember it, called Up in the Air, where he goes around America firing people. But he's also a speaker, and he talks about you start life with a rucksack, and as you go through life, you keep filling your rucksack with pieces, and if occasionally you don't pull up the side of the road and empty it, eventually it will weigh you down. So,
are there any more questions? Oh, this gentleman here, thank you very much.
Hello, my name's David. I like the term right sizing. We are at the present in the throes of moving from a 3-bedroom townhouse looking for 2 floors to live on. So that's our idea of right sizing. It does get a bit much up and down the stairs constantly. And also in terms of what Charlie was saying about, looking at your stuff. I had a friend once who lived in a beautiful house. She asked for my help to move, but she just couldn't let go of anything. Yeah. And all of her it was beautiful furniture to her. I have to say it wasn't particularly that nice, but she loved it. Yeah. And she moved into a sort of like a 3-bedroom semi from quite a large house, She then converted the garage and she packed it. She converted it to a living space, and then she lived in that room with all her furniture. And you literally, I used to visit her, and you had to squeeze between every piece of furniture. She just couldn't let it go.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit sad actually, because she was so wed to that. So I think it's a great idea to think about what you really want later in life, and this is
absolutely
the process.
It can become overwhelming otherwise, can't it?
And in our process of going from 3 floors to 2, we've actually been clearing out a lot. I've probably been doing Charlie out of a little bit of a job, because Facebook Marketplace is a great place to be selling stuff. We've done about $5,000 worth over the last couple of years. But if we had anything, the sort of value that Bonhams would deal with, we would certainly be there.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you.
Yes. Any further questions? This lady at the back here. There's the microphone. Thank you so much. Yep.
Thank you very much.
This will be the last question.
I'm just wondering if anybody else here has partners with dementia, and if you're able to help people with dementia, because Oliver James's wonderful book, Contented Dementia, says never contradict, always agree. I've got a friend who's in a home for people with dementia, and her life is getting more and more narrow because she's always being told what she can't do. She's quite a feisty lady. She's got this horrible diagnosis. She's having a horrible time. I mean, if there was somewhere where my husband and I could maybe go together, are there people trained who are going to be kind? Because quite honestly, people, I woke up this morning, he thinks he's in Australia, he wants to pack, have I got the flight tickets? And the carer says, you're not in Australia, you're at home, and he's completely lost. He needs to have people around him who can understand him, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who's having to deal with this.
No, you're not. In fact, my mother has advanced dementia and she's in a full care home though now. And I think that, I may be right in saying that we're talking about a different level of care that's needed.
Yes, but what about me going with him? Where can I go with him?
There are specialist homes.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And when I said earlier about keeping people living better for longer, I include those people who develop dementia whilst they live with us, because the familiarity of the surroundings and the consistency of our care teams who can support them means they will be able, hopefully, to stay together for longer. When it gets to a point where it becomes a really specialist need, we don't pretend that we can do that. Interestingly enough, if you're again in America, where the communities tend to be much larger scale, they are fully integrated. So they will probably have a care facility on site which will allow people to move within the same community. There are few in this country, but not very many.
There needs to be more, clearly. There needs to be more.
Well, how can I find where they are?
Extra Care Charitable Trust.
Your mic isn't working, Jane.
Extra Care Charitable Trust is an organisation, and
Richmond, actually.
Richmond Villages.
But we have to wrap up today. But thank you so much all for coming. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you for coming.